Hello students. For this chapter I'm going to go through a comprehensive problem that will run through most of the learning objectives for this chapter. It's actually going to go through objectives 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So comprehensive problem P1149A. I'm going to pull that up right now. And for this particular problem in this particular textbook, edition number 4, you can find P1149A on page 688. In future textbooks, it may be on a different page, but you can take a look at the problem here by pausing your video right now and taking a look at all of the learning objectives. If you can't see the whole problem, you can always scroll down on the screen and you should be able to see everything by doing that when you pause the video. So take a look at all of these objectives and all of the requirements, and then we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, now that you've read through all of the requirements, I'm going to switch over to the solution. The first thing we're going to do is calculate all of the variances. We'll do the standard cost of one awning first, then we'll look at all the variances, and then after we've completed that task, then we'll look at some of the explanations for some of those variances in requirement number 3. So they started first here with showing you the input, the quantity standard, and the price standard, and the total standard cost for each one of these items. This information, of course, was given to come with a total of $431 as the standard cost for one of these items, which was, I believe, an awning. Yes, per awning. Now, requirement number 2 is to go through and calculate each one of the variances. So we're going to start with a direct material price variance. We are given the standard here of $13 that was given in the material. To calculate this $12.90, the actual price per unit, that is given in the material, and you just have to do a simple calculation of taking your total costs of $661,254 and divided by the total purchased yards of 51,260, and that is where you get the $12.90 actual price per unit. Okay, then to get and you can go back and see where that, well, let me just do that real quick. Let me go back and show you where that information was found. So right here, they purchased 51,260 yards for a total cost of $661,254. So that is your actual cost and your actual amount of purchased yards, which then shows you here your actual price per unit. Okay, so comparing that to standard, we can see that our actual is below standard by 10 cents, which is going to mean a favorable variance. Then we're going to multiply that by the actual quantity purchased, which was given here in the problem as well, to tell us that our total direct material price variance is favorable, $5,126. Okay, next we're going to look at the direct material quantity variance. Okay, so the actual amount that was used, direct material quantity used, 47,500, and the standard, of course, given as $48,400. Again, all of this was given in the information. And then we can take our variance difference between those of $900, and then we can calculate, of course, our direct material quantity variance by multiplying that by our standard. So our standard material cost being $13. So once again, we're going to have a favorable variance because the actual amount used was less than the standard quantity allowed. Okay, so now we're going to move away from the direct material and look at direct labor. First looking at our rate variance and then looking at our efficiency variance. So when we look at the rate variance, we're going to look at our standard, which is given at $15 per hour. That was given in the material. And then we have to calculate our actual direct labor rate per hour as it's $15.50. That is calculated from the information given as your actual direct labor cost of 168,175 divided by the total labor hours of 10,850, and that gives you 1550. And again, this information here that I just plugged in here is coming directly from the problem. I'll show you that real quick. 168,175 for a total of 10,850 hours. That gives us our actual direct labor cost. Okay, so actual direct labor costs. Of course, here our actual is going to be greater than our standard, so we're going to have an unfavorable variance. Take our difference, multiply by the actual direct labor hours of 10,850 right here, and we get our unfavorable direct labor rate variance. Finally, our actual direct labor hours, looking at that compared to our standard to get our efficiency variance. Okay, we have our hours here, the 10,850 again was our actual. Our standard being allowed of 11,000, again, that was given, to come up with our difference of 150. Okay, again, we're below our standard, so we're going to have a favorable variance. Multiply it by your standard direct labor rate per hour to get your efficiency variance of 2,250. Okay, so now we have, looks like, two favorable material variances, one unfavorable direct labor rate variance, and a favorable efficiency variance on our direct labor. Requirement 3 is asking us basically to summarize this information here that we've already calculated. Sorry, we still need to finish our the rest of our variances before we get to that piece. That's piece 3, part 3. Okay, so we also need to look at our variable manufacturing rate variance. Okay, so that's going to be your actual hours multiplied the difference between your actual rate and your standard rate. Okay, so our actual hours right here being the 10,850. Okay, so we'll take the 10,850 being the actual hours, and we're going to multiply that by the difference in our actual rate and our standard rate. So the actual rate being $8, and I'm sorry, the actual rate is $8.60, and the standard rate being $8. Okay, now, so the actual rate we have to calculate. The oh, I'm sorry, it's given right here. I'm sitting here redoing this and it's given right here. Okay, so it's the 10,850 multiplied by your actual rate minus your standard rate. Of course, your standard rate's given, your actual hours are given. The amount here, the 860, your actual rate, that's simply calculated by taking the information given in the problem, which is the $93,310 given in the problem. I will pull that up here in just a moment. Your actual variable manufacturing overhead rate of 93,310 divided by the actual hours of 10,850. Okay, that's where you are getting your actual rate right here, your actual manufacturing overhead rate of $860. Okay, so let's go back to the problem and show where these two numbers are coming from, the 93,310 and the 10,850. Okay, so your actual variable manufacturing overhead rate, 93,310, divided by the actual hours, because remember, it tells you up here in the problem that the, let me find it, let's see, the company allocates overhead based on the number of direct labor hours. Allocates overhead on the number of direct labor hours. Okay, so our overhead right here, total overhead, is based on the number of direct labor hours right here. So if we divide the actual amount of variable overhead by the total number of hours, which is what I'm doing here, that will show you what your actual rate is of $8.60. Okay, so now we have our variance, which is going to be an unfavorable variance because our actual rate exceeded our standard rate. Okay, next we're going to excuse me. Next we're going to take the variable manufacturing efficiency variance. A little simpler here because we already have our actual hours here and we know what our standard hours are, multiplied by our standard rate, which is also given. Again, this time our variable manufacturing overhead is hours are less than standard, therefore we have a favorable variance. The last two items are related to fixed overhead. So with our fixed overhead budget variance, taking actual fixed manufacturing overhead minus the budgeted. So the 67,500 minus the 63,500, and we come up with a unfavorable variance of 4,000. The fixed overhead budget volume variance is the budgeted fixed manufacturing overhead minus the standard. Okay, so budget is being 63,500 and the standard being 66,000. And that information was also given in the problem here, and the difference being 2,500 and that being a favorable variance, again because your budgeted fixed overhead is less than your standard by $2,500. I'm not going to read through all of requirement 3. I'm just going to let you pause the video for just a moment and take a look at that and read through those items. And pause the video now. And now that you've read through requirement 3 and the answers there, the final question was, are there any variances likely to be interrelated? So there's several ones that could likely be interrelated. Just looking at this, I would think that it's possible that the fact that our variable manufacturing overhead rate variance is an unfavorable because our rate is higher than actual could also be related to the fact that it looks like wages are up here also in this area, and our direct labor rate per hour was $15.50 versus 15, so those could possibly be interrelated. Those two unfavorable variances. So that's one area. You can look at others and look for interrelations between the information given. Okay, that ends the problem for Chapter 11, and as always, let me know of any questions. Thank you.